Good morning and welcome to our third installment of the ITC admissions webinar entitled Prophetic Problem Solvers. We want to say a big word of welcome to the ITC community of students, faculty, alumni, allies, and prospective students who have come to this gathering. There really could not be a more meaningful and timely conversation for us to be engaged in this morning. And today's conversation will be focused on becoming a prophetic moral leader in a new age. This is certainly a moment in which the significance and impact of leadership can be seen, heard, and felt in public life, maybe unlike no other moment in our lifetimes. I mean, we are in a moment where we are facing old obstacles on new ground. When you look at the public square, we are in what many have called a double pandemic, facing long-standing oppression and public issues around state-sanctioned violence, around vigilante violence, which has, in response, caused a great deal of uprising and resistance and a resurgence of that basic statement of fact that Black lives matter. Meanwhile, we're facing that long-standing legacy of oppression on the ground of COVID-19, which has disproportionately impacted Black life, where we are disproportionately dying from this disease. Again, unveiling a long-standing trend in health disparities in the United States. At the same time, we have the ever-present threat of climate change, with Hurricane Laura devastating the Gulf Coast and California wildfires burning wildly. And not to mention, we are days away from facing what may be the most consequential presidential election of our lifetime. Just yesterday, we heard reported revelations that came from Bob Woodward's new book, Rage, in which he reported that the president at one point knew of the danger of COVID-19 without adequately communicating and actually miscommunicating around the dangers and the threats of COVID-19. Leadership matters. And this is a moment in which the significance and impact of leadership can be seen, heard, and felt in public life. Meanwhile, at ITC, we are in a process of innovation and institutional transformation we call ITC 2.0, where the historic mission of ITC, which is to produce leaders who commit to practicing justice and peace through a liberating and transforming spirituality to become leaders in the church and local and global communities. We're executing this mission again on new ground and reinterpreting this mission in our educational aim, which we talk about as cultivating a new generation of prophetic problem solvers. So here we are facing old obstacles on new ground. And here we are in a moment where we are having a meaningful and timely conversation on becoming a particular kind of leader in this moment, a prophetic moral leader. And so this morning, I am thrilled to be in conversation during this admissions webinar with Dr. Robert Michael Franklin. And let me just say, one of the reasons that I'm thrilled to be with Dr. Franklin is because in many ways, this is a full circle moment. 20 years ago, when I entered the ITC as a student, Dr. Franklin was president. And now 20 years later, we have prospective students considering the ITC, and we get to have this conversation about the significance and impact of leadership. And so, Dr. Franklin, I want to welcome you, say thank you for joining us and for pulling aside together to reflect on the nature and significance of moral leadership. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, President Williams. What a privilege it is to join you this morning, and to all of our viewers and participants. I love the ITC as you do, and I'm excited about this conversation and about your vision as you lead us forward into this 21st century. So I look forward to our chat.
Indeed. Thank you, sir. Well, Dr. Franklin is the James T. and Berta R. Laney Professor in Moral Leadership at Emory University. He is also the author of 4 books, the latest of which is entitled Moral Leadership. And so as we begin this conversation, Dr. Franklin, I want to ask you about this timely book that you wrote, and just simply ask you, what brought you to write this book on moral leadership, and why did you think this was the time to write it?
Yeah, that's the question of the hour. And this is a slender volume, Moral Leadership, and the subtitle, Integrity, Courage, Imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned attention to this book because I felt, first of all, that just as you said earlier in your introductory comments, America is facing a crisis of leadership. And it's multiple levels. It's even at the level of competent leadership. But then more profoundly, a crisis of moral leadership. And so that was one dimension of when I looked at our context, I realized there needed to be someone addressing the challenges and opportunities for leadership, and someone rooted in our experience of living, being on the margins, but drawing from what Du Bois wrote in 1924, the gifts of Black folk.
Yes.
And that was what I tried to infuse as I define moral leadership as women and men of integrity, courage, and imagination, who serve the common good and invite others to join them along the way. And in that, I began to I highlight that definition with reference to 4 moral exemplars. Ella Baker, kind of the queen mother and patron saint of community organizing, Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, and Dolores Huerta. Dolores Huerta is a powerful sister. She's the only one of my 4 who are still alive today out in California. But every time you eat your favorite salad or fruit, you should think about Dolores Huerta, who organized the women and men working in the farm working industry to provide justice for them. And she and Ella Baker were powerful sisters working in parallel, and they knew each other.
Indeed, indeed. And let me just say how grateful I was to read you lifting up the women who really made the movement, particularly Ella Baker, who I regard as a patron ancestor, who intentionally flew under the radar, right? But she said, I've always believed that what's needed is not so much folk who are interested in being leaders themselves, but folks who are interested in developing leadership in others.
That's right.
And she did exactly that. So
and you recall her wonderful quote, great people don't need great leaders.
That's right.
They get it done themselves.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yes, sir. So I appreciate you lifting them up. And your exploration of those 4 exemplars speaks to your approach in the exploration of moral leadership that I want to lift up, that I think is important. You know, instead of doing what is typically done in moral discourse, which is lifting up abstract virtues, right? You lift up exemplars of moral leadership, right? And you begin not with the well-known folks, right? You begin with everyday people. And you ground your exploration of moral leadership in first the exemplar that is your grandmother. So I want to ask you to tell the story that you begin the book with, and talk about how she exhibited moral leadership.
Yeah, thank you, Brother President. I write about this extraordinary woman, her name Martha Battle McCann, Mississippi woman, migrated to Chicago. You all have read Isabel Wilkerson's powerful story, The Warmth of Other Suns. And you know, so our families are a part of that that journey of migration away from economic exploitation on farms and in sharecropping, and away from of domestic white terrorism throughout the South with the Ku Klux Klan. So no young man or no young woman was safe in the African American community during those days. They went to Chicago, but there met a new kind of violence and threat, because some of our confused young brothers were organizing themselves into street gangs and going to war with each other. And that's why Martin King and Malcolm and so many others tried to harness that energy directed toward fight the real oppressor, don't kill each other.
That's right.
And one day, my grandmother, next to our house, she created from a vacant lot, she cultivated a garden. So that was already creativity coming out of chaos. And she had me, I was out there, little 7-year-old boy, picking up the rocks and helping to till the land. She planted a garden. She harvested the fruits and vegetables. And then she would cook, a phenomenal cook, and would prepare those meals. And we would take them, deliver them to households where there were sick and shut-in people. So I saw a home missionary at work in the community. But one day she did something that surprised me. I knew she cared about the garden. I knew she was a great mother and worked at St. Paul Church of God in Christ, was feeding people all the time. Everybody loved her. The local brothers and sisters struggling with alcohol would come to our house to get a meal. Grandma would feed them, along with the church ladies in their starched nurses' outfits. They were all together on our porch eating. And I realized this front porch, led by this extraordinary woman, was more inclusive than our church was. Because, you know, my wino brother, they didn't feel like coming to church. They wouldn't come, and they didn't feel comfortable. She brought them together and created this unique koinonia, fellowship. But then one day, there were these two gangs about to fight in front of our house. She's in the kitchen cooking. She heard the ruckus, and she ran out of the kitchen, down the steps, apron flying, and stood in front of these young men. She was embarrassing me. I'm 8 years old. Like, what are you doing to my reputation here? But she looked at these young men and said, you know, I don't know all of you, but I recognize many. I have fed you and your mothers and your families when you were sick. I have taken care of you. And I'm telling you, nobody's going to fight here today. No mother wants to get the call that her son or daughter has been shot or wounded. Because I got that call one day when my son was wounded in Italy during World War II. And those brothers looked at her and looked at each other and looked at the other group. And that little process transpired. And they finally began to back away. These muscle brown homies said, all right. And they walked off. Certain to fight another day, but not that day. Because that sister put her body on the line between them and spoke out of moral authority, integrity and courage and imagination to do that. Other neighbors were watching timidly from their porches. They didn't do that. So what was that? And it's that courage and imagination and Holy Spirit that imprinted me as a little, you know, duckling following her around. And said, that's moral leadership. So that's why I had to dedicate the book to her and to the sisters like that who've held our village together.
I appreciate that so much, in that you take a very clear approach to the exploration of moral leadership that really contributes to the literature in a way that brings front and center the cultures, the histories, the experiences of folk who have been on the margins. And for that, I want to say a big word of gratitude. I'm aware that leadership and the moral leadership that you describe is derived from a quality of relationship, right? And I know there are some pretty powerful folk, in addition to your grandmother, with whom you had some relationships, like John Lewis and Coretta Scott King and Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, rest their souls. And when they began to take their public role as prophetic moral leaders, they were young. They were inspired by kind of an opposition to what they saw to be a steady moral decline in America. during the so-called civil rights era, during segregation and lynching and Jim and Jane Crow. And so now here we are, right? We talked about the moment that we're in now, and a new generation of leaders are emerging in very, very different ways. And I'm curious to hear from you. What do you hear this moment calling for from these emerging leaders?
Yes, important question. I think it's a time of discernment for all of us, for older adults, asking the question, how can we support the next generation? How do we nurture and guide and teach when that's called for? And how do we keep quiet and listen and learn when that's called for? So discernment is necessary. And for elder leaders, elder statespersons in the village, not to insist on always preaching to the student, but to younger people, but also to listen as much as we teach.
Yes.
And I think it's also important for younger leaders. I've been in some dialogue with some of the leaders of BLM and others, and the importance of understanding how to steward your moral authority. Steward your moral authority. At a time after May 25, the George Floyd tragedy, many others before and after, as we all know, and we call their names. But I think Black Lives Matter earned a measure of moral authority that it had worked quietly and hard for over the several years now, developing chapters, building membership. And now here was painted on the streets outside the White House, Black Lives Matter. That message resonated for a moment of reckoning throughout the nation. And to have mayors and governors, to look at all white communities, have Black Lives Matter marches. But then to have this cynical, manipulative, mendacious, or deceptive president and his cronies try their best to try to bind the legitimate protests, First Amendment protected American patriot protests, nonviolent protests, respectful protests that Henry David Thoreau and his book Classic Civil Disobedience, and Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Mandela were all committed to. And to have them also say, there are a group of folk who clearly have their selfish agenda, promoting anarchy and violence and looting. And to say that these are one and the same is wrong. And I know leaders of BLM and others have been saying, do not try to attach that to us. Don't try to taint us or slime us with other folks' agendas. And who knows, some of those other folk may be plants, because we know how the FBI tried to taint Dr. King's movement. Go back and reread what happened in Memphis in 1968. This brother trying to lead a peaceful protest in Memphis in April of 1968, because he knew he was about to go to Washington for the Poor People's March. And he said, I've got to prove we can have a nonviolent protest. And FBI records indicate they hired local street gang members paid them to create law. So stewarding moral authority is so important. And what worries me, President Williams, is right now, Washington Post reports a decline in the popularity and respect for BLM and other protests, because they see it bound with and tied up in a lot of violence and looting. So we got some work to do there. Yes,
indeed. So stewarding moral authority, right? Now, what one of the things that you deal with in a section of the book is really exploring how moral leaders think and what moral leaders do. And in addition to stewarding moral authority, one of the things that you raise that I'm very appreciative of are these three words, right? Integrity, courage, and imagination. And I think that in typical moral discourse, we're used to hearing the word integrity, right? But these latter two words, courage and imagination, seem particularly important and not often applied, right, to what is moral, right? Because we tend to think of the moral in pietistic terms, right, in terms of personal behavioral codes. But I'm thinking about how at ITC, again, we've reinterpreted our educational aim in terms of cultivating a new generation of prophetic problem solvers, right? Which, like you said, it enlarges our thinking about what it means to be in ministry and leadership beyond just being public and prophetic preachers, right? Beyond public communication, but really thinking about how do we imagine and incarnate theological visions of justice and peace through the co-creation of alternative systems and ways of being in the world that really do address the perennial problems that our communities face. I mean, that's really what it takes to be a prophetic problem solver. And it seems that when you talk about integrity and courage and imagination, they're at the core of what that means. So talk a little bit about what these virtues might offer to leaders who feel called to be change agents in the communities that they serve.
Well, thank you for that. And, early in the book, and I appreciate you highlighting the basic structure of the book in the kind of, chapters, I open with asking who are moral leaders and how they come to be. And I use some developmental psychology to describe some of that process of growth, of developing trust and having initiative and so on. And then in that second chapter, focusing on, in an HBCU context, how young Martin Luther King evolved, and what they think and what they do is critical. What happens when there's failure, and how they are disqualified and can requalify. And then I move on to talking about enduring institutions like ITC, like the institutions in the Atlanta University Center, how they endure and their role as moral agents. And then finally, I asked the question in chapter 4, can we repair as a nation? Which is a question I think as we move through this November election, all of us need to be working on our messages and our sermons on how we repair a fractured nation, because it could be on the brink. But when you highlight those three virtues, I said, well, you could look at the theological virtues that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 13, faith, hope, and love. Or you could focus on the classical virtues that so many, Plato and Aristotle and others, temperance, prudence, courage also there, and justice. But I wanted to highlight virtues that I felt were particularly important for our time in history. And so, of course, the integrity. And I use Howard Thurman's image of centering down, just to give some poetry to these abstract virtues. So integrity is about centering down and connecting to your most deeply felt and held values, what you trust most, who you trust most in life, and aligning your thought, your words, and your deeds. Integrity. Courage, the ability and art of stepping forth. When others are sitting on the bench, with their bystanders around, and there's a conflict, John Lewis said, you have an obligation. An obligation. It's not optional to get into good trouble, necessary trouble. And that's what courage drives us to do. But imagination. Einstein said logic will take you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. And it's that sense of needing to be transported, needing, and this is Martin King on the stairs of August 28, 1963, delivering a sermon that he wrote out, several people contributed to. It was brilliant, but it was boring. And people were saying, oh, come on, is this it?
That's right.
And then finally, what happened? A sister
That's right.
spoke up.
That's
Not
right.
just any sister, Mahalia Jackson,
That's
the
right.
world's greatest gospel singer,
That's right.
called out to the world's greatest Baptist preacher.
That's right.
Said, tell them about your dream.
Tell them about the dream.
Good God Almighty. You could almost see a gear be turn in his head. He said, my dream. Yeah. He had just done that sermon in Detroit.
That's right.
In Noble Hall just a couple of months earlier.
That's right.
And Martin said, I have a dream for America.
Yeah.
It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. And good God, at the end, it was the most extraordinary oration of the 20th century. And a sister enabled and helped that happen. Right. So I celebrate that and the imagination that we need in our time to look at, and I love your vision, President Williams. You're talking about these prophetic problem solvers.
Yes, sir.
You could focus on problem solving as a kind of managerial art, a
Right.
set of skills, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we have this challenge, we have this set of assets, this set of people. How do we maneuver, manage, manipulate to get things done?
Yeah.
You're saying they have to be prophetic. Now I'm beginning to see Amos and Esther and Isaiah and Jesus, Muhammad and the prophets and Malcolm. Prophetic problem solvers speak truth to power.
Yes.
And one of the things that John Lewis would be doing if he was with us now is holding Donald Trump accountable.
Yes.
And this almost an administration of organized crime organization. How do we speak truth to power in this day and call America back to its noblest values that Du Bois said America never really achieved?
That's right.
And it always needed Black folk, brown folk, marginalized folk to step up and tell America how to properly recalibrate its moral compass.
Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you. So let's dig a little further on this question of prophetic imagination. In the book, you define imagination as the art of dreaming up where and how we can transcend the status quo. And so I see the placard behind you, Robert Franklin for Congress, and you've recently entered the race to complete John Lewis's term as representative of the 5th Congressional District of Georgia. So I want to hear a little more about what you're dreaming up.
About
the prophetic imagination that you're bringing to your pursuit of this seat.
Yes, thank you. And what a clever way to make that segue. So that's imaginative, brother. I have taught and I have managed 2 anchor institutions in this 5th Congressional District. I have worked on the ground and worked in boardrooms. I've been in pulpits. I've stood and listened to students. I've lived on a campus with young people for years and years of my life. I may be a statesman now, but I'm also as classy, bougie, and ratchet as the other young brothers and sisters out here. And that's because the students taught me, they kept me relevant. And that's why I'm coming to you all to say, I need your help. Wouldn't you like to have a representative in Congress that's a product of your institution, your communities? I will take you with me to Washington if you send me. And so that's my appeal and ask you to look at, and we'll put it in the chat, franklinforcongress2020.com. We need your help. If you live here, vote. If you live elsewhere and know people here, vote. Do it for John Lewis. And vote. The polls are open now. So we are in an early voting opportunity. And then the last day to vote is the election day, September 29th. So that's the voting piece. Vote, get everyone you know, because this will be a low turnout election, which means every single vote counts in a huge way. Secondly, if you're able, you can send a love token, support us as we try to do this work. And also, we urge you to become a part of this movement. You'll see some wonderful position policy statements that are outlined on that website, what we would do about Voting Rights Act. There is a bill in Congress now titled the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. It restores what was taken out in 2013. President Obama alluded to that in his eulogy for John Lewis. Also fighting COVID, the Centers of Disease Control. You see what has happened. It's shameful that there are professionals there ready to go to work, ready to do what they can do. And yet this president and his administration have controlled them and made them move through a filter. And yet we have all this powerful energy here at the Morehouse School of Medicine, at Emory and other locations, trying to promote health equity, trying to teach our people it's time for us to do all we can, but the government and policy have to change as well. So all that's available. check us out at franklinforcongress2020.com. Become a part of this effort. And I want to celebrate what ITC is doing. The nation ought to know more about us. I would ensure that happened, Brother President, in dialogues with you from Capitol Hill. But there are things we can do to highlight our strengths and our assets and not just emphasize our deficits.
Yes. Thank you for that. You mentioned that one of the pieces that you highlight in your discussion of moral leadership is the moral impact of enduring institutions. There's no more enduring an institution in the United States than Congress.
Yes.
And one of the things you also talk about in the book is that you've had the experience of going into historic institutions that had historic missions and legacies to be proud of, but was somehow off kilter and needed to be brought back into congruence, right? In terms of its mission and it's the way it holds the public trust, right?
Yes.
So I'm curious to hear from you about the stuff of institutions and the role of moral leadership in the stuff of institutions. And let me just say, every student who passes through the halls and through the screens of ITC is not just going to be some independent agent, but it is going to steward a public trust, right, in an organization or an institution. And so I think it's important to make this tie that you so brilliantly make.
Well, thank you. And I would say, at ITC, during our time of service there, what a privilege to follow that beloved leader, friend, and mentor, Dr. James Costin, and so many other great leaders before him, back to Harry Richardson, and Otis Roberts, and others, and then Oswald Bronson, and then to have this extraordinary group of leaders who followed, and here you are now on point for a great institution. But there I began to talk about, and I think helped popularize the notion of the public theologian. I wrote a book then titled Another Day's Journey. And ITC was really part of the focus. And so I commend that. We're talking about the book Moral Leadership today, but I was reflecting on ITC's genius and power in Another Day's Journey. Black churches confront the American crisis. At Morehouse, I tried to popularize a simple, easy to remember vision statement for every student, every man of Morehouse. And those were the 5 wells that every student should aspire to be well-read, well-spoken, well-traveled, well-dressed, and well-balanced. So that's my work in those 2 important institutions. But let me just offer in just one short paragraph a free tidbit to those leaders out there. It's in the book, but this is something you can write down on that envelope or that napkin or type into your mobile device. The five A's they're called in helping enduring institutions endure, and both to perform well, which is a concern of any manager or president, but also to be healthy communities. So performance and health together in one organization. And the first A is to aspire. Ask, where do you want to go? Where do we want this church, this congregation, this nonprofit, this institution to go in the future? Second is to assess. Ask, how ready are we to go there? How ready? I'm sure, President Williams, you've had to do this. You have an aspiration, but you got to assess, where are we? And I got to kind of be honest about where we are and taking that diagnostic process of our assessment. Third is to architect. In other words, to ask, what do we need to do, put in place in order to go there? I love some of your innovations in the technology platform to enable online digital education. Architect, what do we need to put in place? The fourth is to act. Get started, have a portfolio of initiatives that are all moving at perhaps a different pace in order to scale up your vision for your congregation or your organization. So aspire, assess, architect, act, and then finally advance. Ask the sustainability question. What do we need to do to keep this in motion?
Yes.
To invite people to invest in what we're doing.
Yes.
And so that is, and I see you doing this so powerfully, President Williams, and you inspire me. And I'm supporting. I signed up for that monthly automatic. They draw money out of my account to support ITC. I want others who are viewing today do that. I want the prospective students out there. How can you sit there and not choose ITC? Don't you feel a voice reaching into your heart today saying, I need to be a part of this? Because when I look at these two leaders, when I see the others who will follow, I want to be a part of that. I want to join the winners and serving God in this time of kingdom building and community building. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been such a rich conversation, and there's so much more that we could explore. But we're coming to the close of our time together. And again, speaking to the ITC community that's gathered, the students, the faculty, the allies, and prospective students who are present, I want to invite you to offer some closing reflections. We're weeks away from the special election in which you're running on Tuesday, September 29th, to fill the remainder of John Lewis's seat, his term. And we're less than 60 days out from the November election. So for folks who feel called to lead in this moment, what would you say to us as we close?
I think that in the spirit of Ella Baker, that it is time for us to mobilize the entire community, not to treat these precious days between now and September 29th, or now and November 3rd, the general election, as ordinary or conventional. Regard them as infused, invested with as sacred time, as God trying to break through and do a new thing, hold people accountable, and lift those who are most oppressed. And you have the power to begin to be a catalyst for that action in your community. So I hope you will do that. I hope you will support candidates who you find worthy, but also make sure that all of our people, tens and hundreds of thousands of whom sit at home on election day. Stacey Abrams said, have a plan. You don't want to go out on that day when it may be crowded. Go early, vote early. Pursue an absentee ballot. Don't let this sun go down today without having a plan for how you vote, your entire family, your community, and then everyone you can reach out to. We have to change this nation. We have to do what John Lewis wrote on July 30th in the New York Times, his final day before we laid him to rest. He said, together, you can redeem the soul of America. And I thank you, President Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Franklin. Wonderful to be with you. Thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you, my friend. Yes, sir.
God bless.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We're now going to transition to Q&A with our Director of Admissions, Ms. Natasha Jordan, and our Director of the Doctoral Program, Dr. Charles Thomas. Thank you for being with us this morning.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I'm in awe right now, and I need a few minutes to just digest everything that I've learned and all the reminders that I received. My day is going to go a lot different now. So we are accompanied by Dr. Charles Thomas, and we have President Williams with us. One of the things that I would love to highlight as we share this time together is the admissions process, and then to dig a little deeper into questions and concerns that you guys have around the Doctor of Ministry program, because we get tons of questions and concerns about that program. And I thought that it would be a great time for Dr. Thomas to be able to connect with you and answer some of those questions and concerns in regards to the interview process, what the committee is looking for, things of that nature. So I do want to start off by saying that we just finished a very successful fall start. The prophetic problem solvers that were attracted to ITC were amazing, and they have already started their journey. We are now on to spring 2021. Can you believe it? It's time for spring 2021 start. And what we're doing right now is we want to walk you through the process, make sure you understand everything, answer questions and concerns. The one thing that I want to do differently this time is more one-on-one conversations. So we did send out Zoom invites to anyone who needed to talk one-on-one, but I want to increase that this time around just to make sure that we're communicating everything that we need to communicate to you efficiently. So Dr. Thomas, could you give us a brief overview of what you look for in the Doctor of Ministry program and a candidate?
I most certainly can. Thank you for having me here today. The process overall is to begin, if you're interested in a DMin program, is live line in the admissions area of the ITC website. And then you will need to turn in the additional documents, transcripts, 3 reference letters, and also a medical evaluation that all need to be turned in to complete your packet. Once your packet is complete, then it goes from the admissions office to my office, and then we review all of your materials to see if you qualify to be interviewed. And to qualify, to begin with, ATS standards are that you have to have a Master's of Divinity degree and 3 years after earning the degree of experience in a ministry setting. Okay, that you have a minimum of a 3.0 GPA, and that your letters of reference are qualified and able to be verified, so to say. Mm-hmm. From that point, if you meet those standards, then we contact you to set up an interview. And during the interview, we go through a series of questions, and in these series of questions, we are trying to discern whether or not that an individual has clear, not necessarily completely known what they want to do research in, but at least a clear understanding of the direction of their ministry and what they would like to focus on in doing a doctorate of ministry program. A lot of folks need to know that a DMin program is about hands-on and about praxis, meaning that the focal point of the program is the DMin project that each student puts into practice. And then their final writing is a culmination of the research they've done, the classes they've taken, and the outcomes of the project that they've actually put into place. So it's not like a PhD program where you just do research, and then you write a dissertation. The DMin program is about practical application of the research you were doing. Also, it needs to be understood that every individual has to have a setting in order to implement the project that they are going to do. So therefore, you have to have, whether you are a church pastor or a leader, or you run a nonprofit or something of that sort, we will ask you in the interview process, what is your current ministry situation? What are you doing? What your skill set is? What you have done well and not done well, strengths and weaknesses. And then we ask some other things that are pertinent to ITC. We want to know if you understand what it means to do theology from an Afrocentric perspective. We also want to know if you understand what it means to do exegesis and how you go about doing that. So we take a number of things into consideration. 3 of us that do the interviews, we put our notes, remarks together to determine whether or not somebody's accepted into the program.
Absolutely. That was an amazing description from beginning to end, really letting them know how the process works. I do realize that different schools work differently, but I believe we just gave an awesome reflection of what ITC process is like. One of the things I actually want to chime in and remind people, because they probably already know this, your interview doesn't start, and the process of admissions doesn't start when you turn in your paperwork. It starts from that first email. It starts from that first call. And I think a lot of people forget that from the time that we're talking with you and you're discerning your next steps, we are listening and making sure that you are a good fit for ITC and that ITC is a good fit for you. So I just want to, as we go through this next process, I want to remind people, again, the interview that Dr. Thomas is talking about, yes, it starts when you speak with the committee, but it also begins when you send that first email, make that first phone call, do that follow-up. So the communication that you're having with the ITC community, the village, is all a part of that interview process. So please keep that in mind. So does anyone have any questions that they would like to address? Oh, I think we see one now. Have you all considered restarting the THD program? Okay, that was a good one. We started off good. So, Dr. Thomas, do you have any background about or any considerations that you heard of in regards to the THD program?
To be honest, that is a question for our provost, Dr. Handy, to respond to. I do know that the THD program was phased out due to low numbers of students. I do not know whether there's been any conversation about bringing it back in some other form. Dr. Handy would know better than I do, so I apologize. I can't formally answer that, but that's as much as I know about the THD program.
Okay. And again, this is what I love about the village here at ITC. If we don't know, we're going to tell you we don't know. And we're going to find the answer for you. Now, Dr. Handy is actually in our chat, so she may want to chime in. But here's another thing that we can do. If you send me an email at njordan@itc.edu, I can make sure that I get that answer for you. Now, I have not heard whispers about that program coming back, but I always want to make sure that I am up to date because I may not be a part of that conversation. So if you email me at njordan@itc.edu, I will make sure I get you an answer today, whether it's yes or no. Thank you. So next we have Rhonda Jones. Okay, and I don't have on my glasses, guys, so
I can tell you that one here.
Okay.
And I can answer that one. It's a question of, if you transfer from another DMin program, is there any possibility of transferring credits? And the answer to that is no. And the reason why it's a no is because our DMin program works as a cohort model, meaning that there are already set courses that every student that is in the program takes each semester throughout the 3 years of the program. So there's no way of bringing in other courses or credits from outside to replace the courses that are part of the cohort. So unfortunately, if you've taken other DMin courses at another school, we cannot transfer them into our DMin program.
Awesome. Rhonda, that was a great question and one that we get often. So I really appreciate you posing that question to us today. Any other questions, concerns, comments, things that we can help with during this process?
Also, I want to mention that we only bring in new students in the fall semester. So now that we've started already the fall semester, our next group of students, if anyone is there interested, we do the interviewing process in the spring and then into the summer. And then those students that are accepted would start in fall of 2021. We don't admit any new DMin students in the spring semester. Now that may change going forward as we're revising the program some, but as of right now, it's just the fall semester that we admit new students.
Absolutely. And I would encourage you to get started now. There's been a delay with transcripts being sent to the school. There's been a delay all around due to COVID-19. So I would definitely encourage anyone who's interested to begin the process now. Let's start those conversations. I think Dr. Franklin said it best when he said it's a time to discern. So this is definitely the time, and we're here to help. Again, you can reach us by email, you can text us, you can reach us by telephone. Mr. Nicholas Petty, one of our admission representatives, is actually in the chat right now. So if you have any questions and it's of a more personal nature, you can always reach out to Nick. You can send a private message to him right now, or you can email us at admissions@itc.edu. So we just got a question about the application fee. So the application fee for all of our programs, well, let me step back. The application fee for our Master in Demon programs is $50. Now, we do sometimes have promotions. We do have different promotions that take place. So for instance, if you complete an application today and you were part of this wonderful admissions webinar, when you type in the word ITC waive, that will waive your applications fee. So we will be waiving application fees to the end of this week for those who attended this wonderful, amazing webinar. So I hope that helps in your journey to discerning what are your most next faithful steps. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Okay, we have one more. I'm gonna make this screen a little bit bigger. Okay, can you define, I think this is for Dr. Thomas. I'm gonna make my screen smaller now. Dr. Thomas. Let's see.
All right, can you define Afrocentrism and what sets ITC apart from other DMIN programs in that respect? Okay, I'll give you the short answer. And the short answer is that being Afrocentric means that we place our Africanness at the center of our understanding and we move from it. In a Western mindset, the Western philosophers and theologians are placed at the middle, and then anyone from Dr. Cone to today that has done anything outside of Westernized theological thinkers has just been seen as something on the periphery. But we as academics and as practitioners, we place our Africanness at the center so that we start from a position of our own ground instead of trying to compete or trying to create some type of defense for being who we actually are. All right, so for that respect, we are completely different from other institutions. And then as we move forward in the program itself, our program is designed and geared for our African American communities, churches, and the diaspora thereof. So our program is focused on what needs are there in our communities as opposed to what needs are there in communities of other faith traditions and beliefs. Another aspect that sets our program completely apart from other institutions is that we do every cohort is taken on an international immersion experience. Previously, we've been to Cuba, we've been to Brazil, we've been to South Africa, we've been to, prior to my being a part of the program, there was even some work done in the Caribbean. And a part of that is not, that trip is not set up to be a missions trip where we go somewhere to do work in another country, but the immersion experience is to go to another country and experience how they do ministry. So we visit other seminaries, we visit different ministries that are being done in various communities, and it has become a cornerstone of the program and a highlight. I have not had a student yet who was not very overwhelmed by the experience of taking a 7 to 10 day trip to Brazil or Cuba or some of the other places and experiencing what they've experienced and seeing how there's so much similarities, but then there was so much difference as well. So that's the short answer of how the program is different. If you want to have further conversation with me about other details, you can reach me. Well, I was going to say my email address, but it's not working. Normally it's cthomas@itc.edu. And we can go from there. We could set up a Zoom meeting and talk further if you have other questions.
And they can absolutely send them to admissions, and we'll be happy to forward them to Dr. Thomas if he went, until the email is working, of course. And I don't know if y'all all heard it. I think I heard Dr. Thomas said that the admissions director will now be going on the trips too. Did y'all hear that? Because I thought I heard him say that. So I'll be joining those trips now. Y'all heard it here first. Do you guys have any other questions or concerns? I'm so happy to have Dr. Thomas, because CJ White, that was a tough one for me, but I'm glad he was here to help me out. Is there any other questions or concerns that we can answer today? And keep in mind that we are available throughout the rest of the day at admissions@itc.edu. We can be reached at 404-527-7794. You can email us. If you would like to request a Zoom meeting, you can do that by email as well, and we will contact you and give you our Zoom link. So if there are no other questions, concerns, all hearts are clear and free, I think that would be the end of our amazing admissions webinar. I'd like to thank President Williams, who is always showing us another way to lead, another way to be, another way to work, and another way to be successful. I would also like to thank Dr. Franklin. There was I have a full page of notes that I'm getting ready to go over after this webinar ends, because there was so much knowledge that he shared with us today. Oh, I think we got one more question coming up. Will the 2020 D-Min incoming class travel? Good question.
I cannot say for certain yet. Within the 3-year process of the program, the travel is usually done in the spring semester of the second year. So for students that have just started in the fall of this year of 20, that won't actually be until spring of 2022. So that being so far off and not knowing what's going to happen between now and then with the pandemic and things, I can't say for certain. I will say that what we are working on right now is we are setting up a set of meetings and links with the places we would have visited this past spring in Brazil, so that our students will still be able to have some interaction since we weren't able to travel. But again, the answer is right now, that's too far off for me to be able to say whether we'll be able to do that or not.
Okay, thanks for that question, Vincent. Okay, what if you live in another state? Can you attend remotely? Absolutely. Now, I want to make sure that I'm answering this question correctly, because we do have, of course, our master level programs and our D-Min program. I'm going to assume you're referring to our D-Min program. So absolutely. And I'll let Dr. Thomas talk a little bit more about the intensives that they have at the campus.
Yes, our usual practice is we have a 1-week intensive that occurs on campus at the beginning of each semester. And then the rest of the semester is spent doing your classwork with your professors and mentors at a distance and online. Currently, because the campus is closed, we didn't do this past fall's intensive face-to-face, but we did it on Zoom. So again, with the things being unsure of how we move forward, we will still have the intensives, whether or not we get back to the point of doing them face-to-face on campus, or it's going to remain being online. So if you live in another state, even if you live in another country, that would be the only time that you would be required to be on campus, is when we do the intensives. And of course, when we do the Immersion trip, you would have to travel for it.
Awesome. That was a great question, and I appreciate that answer, Dr. Thomas. Any other questions, concerns, comments? So as I said earlier, it's definitely a time to discern what are going to be your next most faithful steps. Keep in mind, application fees are waived. If you type in ITC waive at the application, we're going to go ahead and waive that application fee for you this week. So if you are really in heavy discernment and you're not sure if this is what you want to do, I would say this is a great time to complete the application, so that aspect of the process is already completed, and then you can begin having conversations with myself, Dr. Thomas, and other supporting units within ITC to make sure that we are who we say we are, because you need to know that as well, and that you are a good fit for the institution as well as us being a good fit for you. So I will end on those words if there are no other questions or concerns. Again, I love what Dr. Franklin said about this being a time for discernment, not only in your education, but I think we all are discerning everything in our lives. And if we can be of any help, even if it's not connected to you attending ITC, this is a place where Black Lives Matter. This is a place where we have a lot of prophetic problem solvers. Connect with us, and we can help in any way that we possibly can. So we appreciate you. Thanks for connecting with us again. And that is the end of our admissions webinar. Oh, wait, I thought it was. Wait a minute, we got one more. Sorry, guys. If you have one DMin, do you have to go the whole required DMin time to gain another? Okay, so if you already have a DMin, Dr. Thomas, I guess they're asking, do you have to come in and fulfill the entire program, or there's a way that, sounds like a transfer question again, but
yes, you would have to do the entire program again, because the program is set up as a cohort model, and we have a set number of courses that everybody takes. It's not like doing a master's program where we offer 10 classes each semester and a student decides what they want to take. The courses are already mapped out and are already there. So there's no way to pick and choose or jump over or not be a part of one of those classes. So yes, if you're interested, if you have a DMin but are interested in doing another DMin at ITC, you would have to start from scratch for the program.
okay, that's a great question. And I'm assuming this gentleman already has his DMin, so I definitely appreciate you asking that, because there's somebody else who was sitting there thinking that same thought. So again, any other questions or concerns, you can reach us at admissions@itc.edu. Even if they're for Dr. Thomas, we'll be more than happy to forward them to him right now or make sure that he gets them some way. So Dr. Thomas, I understand that you're going to be ending us in prayer today, sending us out with a good word.
Okay. Lord, we thank you for this day and having the strength to endure and carry on in such conditions that we currently live in, not only this country, but around the globe. We know that when there often is turmoil and strife, that we ought not look at the turmoil, but look for you in the turmoil, moving us out of it and through it. So we, anew and afresh today, ask for your strength, for your continued guidance, for the covering of all that are on this call, their families, and all those that they love and whose lives they touch, that you may continue to be all that we need, even during times such as this. We ask, O Lord, that you would provide discernment to those that are considering the ITC, and that they would move in the directions of becoming a part of our great institution, and seeing that what we have to offer and allowing them to contribute to allow the institution to become better, as well as allowing us to help them strengthen in their ministries and their educational endeavors. We thank you, Lord, for this time we've shared together. We ask these in all things in thy Son Christ's name. Amen.